Hello everyone, and welcome to a stream of me being under the weather. Yeah. I don't know if I'll be the most high energy today. I wasn't yesterday. Get my controller worked around the table leg. But, you know, you should at least have something going on with some trucking. It'll be a time. I won't say a good time, it'll be a time. I could do the Christmassy thing. I don't know if I really want to. Ugh, Jesus. I'm also a little gassy because I decided to try to eat. That was probably a bad idea. Okay, I put myself in Prim because I'm here to visit Prim Slim. He's a pretty chill guy. He's pretty nice. I don't even know exactly where I would find the event stuff. Because it definitely doesn't... Nothing's standing out to me. Like... Actually, want to go through with the... I think... Like, San Diego was one of the not mentioned areas, I think. I don't know, man. I'm just gonna go with Prim. I mean, I got some really high-value jobs I could do. But, like... That's pretty far away. Let's look at Las Vegas, I suppose. They expect that in an hour. Or is that my expected arrival time? Because there ain't no way that job's being done in an hour. Yeah, no, that looks like the job that it's the job duration. Yeah, that ain't happening. You cannot drive from Las Vegas to Washington in an hour. That's just not possible. You know, with this one, it's apparently also an urgent delivery. Not much more than an hour, though. That's... I don't see that being possible. There are not many jobs here. Jeez. That one's even worse. I think that's even further away. Yeah, I don't think there's really any jobs here we could... I mean, there's this. This will take us to Barstow. Let's do this one. Wait. Hold on. I need to fix my truck. Also, y'all have to let me know if the music's too loud. To me, it seems fine, but I'm not sure. Man, it's been a while. Gotta keep the hood ornament lined up with the mayo. That's basically what'll keep me lined up. Come on, truck. Yeah, I could go to Las Vegas, but I'll take this job. It pays for the repairs I just did. Yeah, I'm probably just gonna ramble about some random stuff throughout this stream, because that's usually what happens when I do these streams. And honestly, the thing most on my mind right now is the World of Warships carrier changes. So I'm probably going to ramble about those a fair bit, even though I know nobody watching this probably cares at all. But it's more just the reactions of people that are disappointing me when it comes to the carrier changes. Because it's clear a lot of people are very passionate about carriers in World of Warships. I kinda am. They're one of my favorite classes of ship to play. That's the wrong way. So to see them being basically massacred, it doesn't feel good. And, like, there's things Wargaming could do to keep the change they want to make without making carriers completely unviable. It would just require more effort than they seem to be willing to put into it. A good example being, like, my proposed change to their mechanics of, rather than travel mode not being able to spot things, period, it only being able to spot things in the outer 20% of a ship's air detection. But you propose that idea, and you get the destroyer mains complaining that that's still too much because they might get spotted at some point. Like, that's basically the argument boiled down from a lot of these destroyer mains, is if carriers aren't there to spot them, they might get spotted, and they can't have that. Can't have poor little destroyers getting spotted. They might die. I need fuel, so... Wrong button. I have a new email, I can wait. I'm driving, I'm not checking my mails. But, like, just think of how absurd that is. Like, in the context of any other game, to have an entire group of players basically be like, no, we can't have this, it counters me. And if it didn't exist, I'd have no counter. And that be the thing that everyone's like, oh, no, that's gotta change. The thing that counters them, oh, that's gotta go. And, like, I can feel for the new player argument, because there are definitely people who try World of Warships, get to Tier 4, usually having joined after being recommended the game by a friend and playing with that friend, which removes your new player protections. And then getting utterly decimated by a carrier. Because that carrier that they're running into is actually a good player that knows how to aim the carrier armaments. And there is a lot of people who love to Seal Club low tiers. They just do. And it's unfortunate that playing with a friend removes your new player protection entirely, but Also, if it didn't, then, you know, there'd be problems, because your friend could just division with you, and then your friend gets to Seal Club with nothing stopping them. But, like, by that same token, I remember being a new player in World of Warships. You know what I hated? Destroyers. You know what I stopped hating once I reached Tier 4 and started running into the old RTS carriers? At least when the RTS carriers were in the game. Destroyers. Because they were kept at bay by the carrier. More so than they are now. Also, my webcam's out of position. That or I'm out of position. I don't know which. Good enough. I mean, it's not. I'm not. So I can kind of fix that. But, like... yeah, carriers can be a problem. But so can destroyers. And, let's be honest, between the two, I would much rather deal with a carrier than a destroyer. Because that carrier isn't instantly killing you. Oh, I really should not have tried to eat. I'm so gassy now. Ugh. Like, the carrier is gonna tickle you for a while, and then you'll die. Unless you get detonated. But that could happen from literally anything hitting you. That destroyer, you see the wave of torpedoes appear about 1 kilometer from you, and you're just dead now. Sometimes without ever even being spotted, because they're just sitting far enough back that they're not spotting you, but they know there's people there. Because there's always people in specific spots. I can do it in destroyers, and I'm not a good destroyer player. So, like... it's not really inconceivable to me that, destroyers are the stronger ship type. Especially just using common sense, logic, things that seem to escape a lot of warships players. I don't mean that in a bad way, like... a lot of people definitely have a lot of really bad takes on how to balance aircraft carriers. I can't tell if it's my music or the game that's really loud. Hold on. Okay, it's the game. I thought that was my music. Okay, my music's probably more than good then. Like one example I saw of someone saying, oh, this would balance carriers. And this is a common thing that gets thrown around, is, oh, just make anti-aircraft overpowered, basically. You know, make it so ships like Worcester and Golden Lion and Des Moines and, you know, all the big AA heavy cruisers and light cruisers and super light cruisers become literal no-fly zones, and if a carrier goes near them, they lose their entire squad. And remove the replenishing of planes. And you know, do all this stuff that would make it literally impossible for the carrier to play. And when you point out to them that that is literally what they're proposing, they'll reply with, yeah, but the carrier prevents me from playing. And then we'll provide examples of how they play, that it's how they're playing is wrong. Not the carrier's fault that they're being an idiot. Like, one example I'd always see is, like, the destroyer player complaining that when they rush ahead of their team and to get to the cap first and contest it, which isn't that important, they end up getting spotted and killed by the carrier. It's like, yeah. You're announcing your presence not only to the carrier, but to the entire enemy team. A radar cruiser would have the same effect on you. And those same destroyers also complain about radar, because it spots them. Like, destroyers and battleships are the two most handheld classes in warships. Destroyers at least take some level of skill, but given how payouts work, you can play a match in a destroyer, get 0 damage, and still score about half of your halfway up the scoreboard of your team, as long as you were spotting things. Because you get a fair chunk of silver and experience for spotting things. Not enough to make up the difference of not dealing damage, but enough that you'll be fine. You'll probably still break even on the match dealing 0 damage. And you get spotting damage just by existing. Like, I say this as someone who plays every class of ship. I don't tend to focus on any one class, because that would get absurdly boring. Because, like, say what you will about different ships, a lot of them, if they're the same class, tend to play about the same. You know, there's not a big difference in how you play Britannia at tier 5 and Yamato at tier 10. They play about the same. They fill the exact same role. Destroyers, there's some level of variance. Because, like, you get destroyers like Friesland, or I think it's Groningen is its equivalent, where they have no torpedoes at all and they're a pure gunboat. Or for a Sherman, which has effectively no torpedoes at all and is a pure gunboat and can't do much of anything other than spot and shoot things. So they tend to just resort to shoot things. I don't need the experience. Legitimately, I do not need them. Risk, could you not get into things right now? Risk. Get your butt out of things. Let's see what we got. Used trucks for sale. Yeah, I don't need trucks. I got a truck. It's literally the best possible truck I could have, horsepower-wise anyway. I actually have multiple trucks already. Apparently there's new upgrades available. Really? That's it? So what they mean is there's more cosmetics available. It's not upgrades. Is it this one that has the... Yeah, okay, I can't do any of that stuff. Yeah, I don't even know where the event stuff is. Unless it's in here. But that's not what I've heard, so I don't know. Yeah, I'm definitely not seeing anything that strikes me as different, so... Was that charged lemonade? I know it wasn't, but I could swear it said charged something. My brain is barely working. I'm not even seeing it now. At least I thought I could swear it said charged. I am out of it, man. I am not feeling well. Alright, let's see here. So they need it by Wednesday the next day. Or no, that's midnight. I suppose it is 6 at the moment. I might be able to do that, but this job pays more. It even pays more per kilometer. Like, this is just the better job. Whoops. I thought I might be able to get around. Turns out, I could not. But yeah, like, it's... There's definitely some people who are attempting to offer some level of constructive feedback to Wargaming. But also, I dislike how Wargaming's Discord mods are handling feedback towards the update. Because they're pushing everyone to just go to the main feedback discussion, which on paper sounds like a great idea. Like, that's where people should be, right? Oh, I'm not turning that way. Go straight. Oops. But see... Excuse me. The problem with doing that is that that discussion is so full of people just having bad faith arguments with each other. Nothing productive is coming out of the main discussion because it's just bad faith arguments from both sides. That generally boil down to people just throwing personal insults back and forth. And like, there are some discussions that popped up that I'm sure would have some pretty nice discussion to them had the topics not been locked with a moderator going, just go talk in the main forum. It's like, that, guys. Yeah, my truck should be fine. I don't see why it wouldn't be. It's heavy cargo, and literally I could not be better at dealing with heavy cargo. Can I leave through here? No. Okay. This is gonna be a bit of a bitch. Okay. Because I gotta make this thing do an immediate left. Pull it out slightly. Try not to take out their street light. And like currently the main argument going on is between two people arguing over the damage output of a battleship lobbing high explosive compared to Hakaryu's torpedo bombers. And when you compare them on paper, yeah, they're the battleship puts out more damage. In practice, it's entirely situational, which is where the whole bad faith arguments are coming in. Because, like, oh, please go, vehicles. I need you to go. Little white car, please do not. Just don't. And I mean, like, there is a little bit of merit to those arguments, but not in a, oh, this is obviously better because this deals more damage. It's more a case of you can use those arguments for determining, you know, what the carrier's armament is most similar to. And, like, carriers can be broken down into rockets are cruiser shells, bombs are battleship shells, and torpedoes are, well, torpedoes. And for as much as people like to throw around carriers are super easy, those tend to be the people who've never played carriers. They just watch a good carrier play and assume. And you know what assuming does? It makes an ass out of you and me. Fun fact, that is actually how I learned how to spell that word. Yeah, I'm just gonna cruise control at 80. I get the impression YouTube has paused my music. This is a straightaway enough. Hold on. No, it's doing the silly load forever thing. Got it. Oh, that's annoying. You know what? We'll just have truck ambience. Because I don't feel like fighting with YouTube. It's probably some part of their stupid anti-ad blocker crap. I think my headlights are on. I can't tell. But, like, it's... like, I can't overly blame a lot of the players that have never played carriers for just, oh, carriers are so easy because, like, they'll make a mistake and then the carrier will punish them for it. Like, I can't blame people for that. I used to be the same way towards destroyers. I would make a mistake, a destroyer would punish me, and I would be very frustrated that destroyers could do that. I started learning how to not make those mistakes. Like, that's what you should do. But a lot of Warships players really just want Wargaming to step in and hold their hand, and nerf everything that might hurt them, so that only they can deal damage and have fun, because them having fun is more important than learning how to play. which there's a game mode just for that. It's called Co-op. It's really great. If you just want to go have fun and not actually learn how to play World of Warships, play Co-op. Like... if you want to actually learn how to play and get good at the game and have, you know, valuable input when it comes to balance changes, then play randoms and GG a bit more. Like, I know I've said this before many times, but one of my inspirations when it comes to anything competitive gaming, being the StarCraft player White Raw. I would say his actual name, it's Ukrainian. My tongue cannot make those sounds. I probably could if I heard someone say it, but I don't want to say it wrong. His StarCraft name was White Raw. And it basically was after I had started trying to get into competitive StarCraft, specifically StarCraft 2, I ended up finding a quote from him that more or less stuck with me. And I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't remember the exact quote. It's also in pretty broken English because dude's Ukrainian. Slava Ukraine. But, you know, effectively, it boils down to more GG equals more skill. The more you can accept that you're gonna lose, but every loss is a learning experience, the better you'll get at anything, really. Like, that could literally apply to writing, woodworking, welding, auto mechanics. The more you do something and the more you fail at it, the better you're gonna learn how to not fail at it in the future, as long as you look at failure as a learning experience. If you look at failure as the worst thing ever and you'll never succeed and this sucks, it should change, things should change for me, you're never gonna get better at it, because your mind isn't in a position where you're ready to learn. And like, when it comes to something like World of Warships, there's a lot you can do to mitigate carrier damage, to mitigate carriers attacking you entirely. But people aren't interested in that. They want to be able to do absolutely everything themselves in the team-based game of World of Warships. So rather than, say, you know, some new player rushes their way to Bismarck, because it's Bismarck, who wouldn't rush to Bismarck? It's Bismarck. It's the unsinkable battleship. It's very sinkable. But, you know, they rush directly to Bismarck, they end up in a game against an Implacable, and that Implacable utterly wrecks them because they sailed off entirely on their own. And got wrecked because they were on their own. They were a lone target. And then they'll turn around and complain that the carrier was the problem, not them for going off on their own and doing something stupid. That wasn't the problem at all. It was the carrier's fault that they died, and the carrier needs nerfed because of that. Anyone with half a brain could see how stupid that sounds. But there is quite the large number of people who firmly believe that what, you know, they're infallible, and if they lose, it's a problem with the game, not themselves. I mean, I'm sure there are people who play out American Truck Sim here and do things like what I just did, of almost go off the road, or maybe they do go off the road, Maybe some random car ends up not paying attention to them and rams into them and causes a big accident. I'm sure those people would be like, man, the AI needs to change, it needs to be better. No, you need to learn how the AI works. And quite simply, if you see a vehicle entering the highway in this game, get out of its way. It doesn't care you're there. The AI doesn't know you're there. If it did, it would slow down. I mean, I've run into that. I treat it like it's just a bad driver. Because, I mean, it does kind of work out that way. God, I'm so gassy. I apologize. At least y'all get some decent ASMR of the truck sounds. Though that is looking way too loud. I may actually want to lower the volume a bit. Yeah, that's way too loud. Hold on. This might be too low now, but I'm gonna try it at 30% volume. Oh, that's looking much better. Yeah, it's just below orange. That's looking a lot better. Like, I've also seen a lot of that with, like, competitive Pokemon, where people will, you know, call for the banning of something that really it just comes down to they need to learn how to deal with it better. Thankfully, Smogon hasn't banned a lot of the things that people have complained about. They've banned some of it, which I honestly think is kind of bullshit, but, you know. Like, oh no, the Focus Band is banned because it protects your Pokemon 10% of the time. And that's too random. Someone might lose because of that. But, like, one of the things with competitive Pokemon that regularly gets called for being banned is, Wish Protect Toxic Umbreon. You basically outfit an Umbreon with, generally, how I would do it was, Taunt, Toxic, Wish, Protect. You taunt the opposing Mon, you Toxic the opposing Mon, or the other way around, depending on what you need to do. And then you start Wish Protecting, and they will eventually burn down from the poison. But see, there's a fun thing with that strategy, and it's pretty counterable. There are many Pokemon that are immune to being poisoned. Poison the Steel types, for an easy example. There are other Pokemon that being poisoned is a massive boost to them. Like Zangoose with its ability Toxic Boost. If you're gonna willingly poison a Zangoose, it will gladly take that. Umbreon also, while being tanky, really isn't that tanky. It is very conceivable to just 2-hit KO an Umbreon. Well, more than 2-hit KO it, basically, of having a lot more than 50% of its damage, HP and damage from one attack. Like, it's not the hardest thing in the world to do. Especially because, like, with how Pokemon is, that Umbreon can be either physical or specially defensive, or bad at both. Well, not bad, but okay at both. Because you only have so many effort values to go around, you can only train into either defense, special defense, plus HP, or forego HP to train both defenses. Either way, you're still less effective at tanking either. In the case of foregoing HP, you're worse at protecting both, but you're slightly better at both. You know, you're better at your worst, but worse at your best. Or you'll be bad at one defense or the other. which is where carrying a mixed team comes in, instead of focusing into primarily special attackers. Which generally, when metas like that come along with Pokemon, you see Chansey and Blissey come out of the woodwork because you're not taking one of those down specially. You're just not doing it. But, like, it's one of those things of, to counter the Wish Protect Umbreon, you get better. You learn better team building. But people would rather sit around and cry about how unfair it is, rather than try to become better at the game. And the same thing happens with warships. And, like, there's a lot of people who also just... in one breath, they'll cry they want World of Warships to be more realistic. And then in the next, they'll be talking about something like, you know, oh, my Wooster should be able to shoot down an entire attack squad from a carrier. Seeming to not understand how realistic AA worked. Because, brief history lesson for y'all, because to do this properly, I would need to actually be able to pull up the documents from the US military to show you. But in World War II, let's use the most common AA gun of the Americans, the 40mm Bofors gun. Those things needed to fire something like, I think it was like 80 to 100,000 rounds to, on average, shoot down a single aircraft. Those guns did not have a hugely high rate of fire. I might be getting their figure confused with another one, but still, it's an absurd amount of ammo that had to be expended to shoot down one aircraft. Even things like the 127mm with their proxy fuse HE. Or was it timed fuse? I forget which the Americans had. It was one or the other. But fused HE. That still needed a few hundred shells per aircraft shot down. Because AA, at least in World War II, was not about shooting down the opposing aircraft. That was a nice bonus if it could happen. It was more about deterring the attack. And in World of Warships, speaking as someone who plays carriers, oh yeah, that strong AA deters my attacks. Like, if you're gonna offer me the choice between attacking a Golden Lion or a Wooster, or attacking, say, 2 Yamatos and a Montana, I'm going to attack the 2 Yamatos and the Montana because I know their AA is weaker. I'm going to go away from the high AA cruiser and attack the lower AA battleships. Because it would be utterly stupid to attack the high AA cruiser because I'm going to incur more losses. The AA deters me by being effective. Now, realistically, the AA from any ship should scatter an incoming attack. It should. Planes should not keep a solid formation when attacking something that's shooting at them. But at the same time, given every ship has AA guns, and doing that would make plane carriers absurdly weak with current damage output, and the only alternative way to get around that would be to either make AA guns a lot more vulnerable to attack and thus being destroyed, or greatly increase the damage of an aircraft carrier to compensate for the lack of damage, which would then potentially cause the aircraft carrier to cause even more damage if it has the ability to drop its attack from outside of AA range. You know. Like, I know a lot of people that mention the dispersion of air attacks are thinking back to RTS carriers. And the RTS carriers, yeah, defensive AA fire made your attack disperse. Didn't matter how good or bad your AA was, having the consumable defensive anti-aircraft running made the carrier's attack disperse. It wouldn't hit the target generally, or at least it wouldn't fully hit. You know, your attack would scatter. But see, they can't really do that any longer, because CV air squads aren't attacking with enough firepower for that to be even remotely balanced anymore in favor of the carrier. Like, using my British carriers as an example. So I like the British carriers. They're bad, but I like them. I like bad ships. At tier 10, they drop 3 torpedoes. Each of those torpedoes deals, I think, about 6,000 damage before damage reductions. That's not much damage, when most of the things they'll be dropping those against, because they're really slow torpedoes, have hundreds of thousands of HP. You are downright tickling them. Like, it's just one of those things where if the attack was dispersed, and say only now you could only reliably hit with a single torpedo, if that, now you're dealing basically no damage whatsoever. Now, this could be counteracted if, say, they were to double or triple the damage that airdropped torpedoes deal. But they won't, because, once again, if that same carrier, the same Audacious, could drop its torpedoes from outside of AA range, and thus they don't get dispersed, well, now it's going to be nuking things. You know? So that's not a good solution. The alternative to that would just be to allow carriers to basically all play like the Russian carriers. And then, yeah, then defensive AA could cause attacks to disperse. And then there would no longer be a reason to play the Russian carriers unless they got some pretty big HP buffs, because then they would have nothing going for them at all. But there's also other things about the carrier changes that are being proposed that could potentially be very, very bad. Like, giving carriers manual control of their secondaries, of the largest caliber of their secondaries, and using that as part of the balancing factor. Well, Saipan and Sanjiang have no secondaries at all. None. The biggest gun they have is a bunch of 40mm Bofors. And those are not secondaries. Those are AA guns. Some carriers, like Audacious, it has guns. It has 8 double turrets of 113mm guns. Fire high explosive. That barely pen enough to pen some tier 10 destroyers. Cannot pen others. Also fires considerably slower than the same guns found on Daring. Midway has a good number of guns per side. It's 9 127s and single turrets. Single turrets that reload slower than Gearing's dual turrets of the same caliber, giving them less damage output than a Gearing, firing the same guns, the same caliber, and much fewer guns, purely because of the reload difference. Literally, the only two carriers that are okay when it comes to their secondaries being given manual control, one of them could be absolutely broken with manual control, the other one will be alright. The one that's alright will be the Germans' Richthofen. Its 105s can't pen 32, but they can pen 26. That's most tier 8 plus cruisers. They'll mostly be fine. And then you get Hakuryu, with its basically Harugumo plus a fifth of another Harugumo on each side of the ship. Yeah, that thing's going to be utterly ridiculous with manual control of its secondaries. As long as it has enough range for it to matter. But if they don't give it enough range for it to matter, then it's not gonna help to give carriers manual control of their secondaries. Like, I feel like that idea was proposed without actually looking at carriers first. I mean, I'll take carriers being able to fire their guns. That'll be pretty neat. But, like, it's basically just going to be used to turn Hakuryu into a giant Harugumo. It's also going to cause, ships like Audacious to become even weaker than they are now. Because, well, I suppose that will fully depend on how this is implemented. If your secondaries can still act as secondaries while you're controlling your aircraft, then I guess Audacious will be in the same position it's in now. If they can't, well, then Audacious loses just that little bit more utility that it desperately needs. Why are you slowing down so much? I'm already going 80. This is a 129 zone. Oh, it's because that truck there decided to slow down to make its turn instead of just making the turn and slowing down once it made it. The coward. The smart driver. Wow, I've spent almost an hour ranting about this. And I spent a half hour one of the last Warship streams I did ranting about it too. As you can tell, I'm also fairly passionate about carriers. Like, I like the things. They're fun to play. And it doesn't help that I have in now recent memory and on stream moments that would have been impossible with their proposed changes. Using, playing asymmetric battles. With the proposed changes, a lot of my matches in carriers would have been losses because I can't spot for myself. Like, there are times when a carrier must be able to spot for itself. And their idea of, oh, well, let's give it a consumable that's basically the submarine hydrophone, but, for aircraft. It's like, that isn't gonna help. Like, it's not as good as being able to spot things. And also won't solve what some of the destroyer players want either. Because it'll mean that all the carrier needs to do is fly over to roughly where the destroyer is and then activate the consumable and then switch to attack mode. Once they've detected its rough location. So I can't imagine that actually even being implemented because, well, this entire change seems to be focused on hand-holding destroyers more than they're already handheld. And there are people pretending that these changes will fix the meta and everyone won't be playing so passively because, without carriers able to spot, then obviously everyone can play more aggressive, except no. And there's an easy way of telling that this won't fix the meta. The competitive game mode of Clan Battle and King of the Seas, the official competitive tournament, people play using the exact same long-range meta that they use in randoms, only carriers are banned and have been for quite a long time from both things. Like, if carriers being nerfed so that they can't spot things was gonna fix the meta, then the competitive game modes that have carriers banned would not be playing to the meta that you see in randoms. The problem isn't carriers. Carriers are being used as the scapegoat. And hopefully once carriers are nerfed, people are going to actually realize that the problem was never carriers. Like right now, the biggest issue in World of Warships is just simply the fact that they've not updated their mechanics to reflect the ships they've added. Like, it was over 5 years ago now that they last reworked armor in any meaningful way. And they did it because high-tier cruisers and battleships both were really struggling due to all of the high-caliber guns they were adding. Well, they've started adding even more bigger guns, and they've not reworked armor again yet. These more bigger guns have also been getting more and more accurate as time goes on. Like, the most recent example being the new Japanese Tier 10 of Bungo. It is a 10-gunned, 457mm armed battleship, with a consumable to make its dispersion better by, I think it's 10 or 20%. I think it's 20%. And it also has the absolute highest Sigma rating, which is basically a rating of how likely your shells are to group towards the center of your dispersion. So it has the smallest dispersion circle, tied with the highest tendency for shells to trend to the center of that circle, and guns that overmatch cruiser armor everywhere. For those who don't play World of Warships or just don't know this mechanic, overmatch is a mechanic that basically means if your gun is, I think it's 14.3 times bigger than the armor thickness it's hitting, it ignores the armor. It just goes right through as if the armor isn't even there. So you can probably imagine the issue with that cruisers are unable to push up because they'll be overmatched by battleships the moment they're spotted. Destroyers don't want to move up because they have no support from their friendly cruisers, and battleships don't want to move up because they don't have to. You see the problem. It ain't carriers. Like... And there are ways wargaming could fix that without a huge amount of effort. It would just piss some people off. And the easiest solution is to just remove the overmatch mechanic entirely. Just remove it. That mechanic entirely exists to punish people for playing correctly. Just remove it. That would solve a lot of the problem, because then cruisers could angle and push forward and play the game without having to be completely just screwed over by the game mechanics. Which then would, basically leave battleships two options. One, sit even further back, or two, close to closer range so that their guns are more effective. The more nuanced way of changing this, while maintaining overmatch, is to have overmatch only work at certain ranges. That way, ships would have to close the distance to take advantage of overmatch. And have the value of the overmatch possible change basically depending on range. So like, using the Golden Child example, Yamato would only get its 32mm of overmatch at, let's say, 14 kilometers. That would now necessitate Yamato getting to within 14 kilometers of its target to take advantage of its overmatch. Now, as I made mention, this would be a much more nuanced solution, because I literally just pulled that number out of my ass, but it should be based on the factors of the AP shell in question. How fast is it going? How big is it? Those would impact the amount of armor it could penetrate. It should also impact the amount of armor it can ignore. And, well, shells lose velocity over time. There are some battleships that would utterly screw over to have it based on velocity and caliber. It would basically mean the Americans would almost never overmatch anything because their shells are slow. They're really heavy, but with a lot of armor penetration. At least once you get to Iowa and Montana. I'm not honestly sure about the others. Like, that right there would solve a lot of the issues that World of Warships has with Overmatch. If there was something in place, like, you know, a more nuanced system in place that took more factors into the equation other than is gun 14 point whatever bigger than armor. It could also allow battleships with smaller caliber guns to potentially get, you know, to potentially overmatch things that they can't now. They just have to be sufficiently close enough. Because let's be real, for a shell to ignore armor, it would need more than just being bigger than the armor is thick. It would need to be going a sufficient velocity. And ammo that, you know, a shell that isn't that sufficient size, but is going higher than the sufficient velocity, would also stand a pretty good chance of overmatching armor. So, like, the Italian 381s at, let's say, 5 kilometers could overmatch 32. That kind of thing. So they need to get to extreme close range, but in doing so, they get rewarded for it. Unlike now, where it doesn't matter how close they get, their shells are always going to bounce off of basically everything. You know, I'm gonna pull off the road here. No. Ooh, that's not the button I want. I don't remember the button. Oh well, doesn't really matter. I'm gonna go grab some coffee. So I will be back in a moment or two. Alrighty, I return. Kinda want to. I want something for background music. But I can't have it be a playlist because YouTube is being a dick. This should work. It's just an hour and a half long video. That should more than work. I'll give some level of background music. That seems too loud. Hold on. That's better. Okay. I look forward to the possible copyright claim. I say possible copyright claim because, well, I very recently did a stream series on Star Ocean the Second Story R, and there's a copyright troll who is trying to claim Stab in the Sword of Justice as their own track. It's probably one of these people who mumble rapped over a sample from Stab in the Sword of Justice and is now trying to claim they own Stab in the Sword of Justice because they mumble rapped something over it. Let me guess, I'm gonna have to pull in for a weight inspection. Yeah. Trust me, GPS, I'd love to bypass this. It needs to stop when you can just drift over the thing. Yeah, like it's... World of Warships has many problems, and aircraft carriers keep getting used as the scapegoat to deflect away from the real problems of the game. And, like, there are some aircraft carrier players who I can very much agree with that the old RTS system didn't need completely removed. It needed a tutorial and the damage reduced. That's all it needed. And even then, the tutorial just had to exist for, you know, the mechanics that suddenly got added without telling you at Tier 6. Which was manual strafing of fighters and manual dropping for your torpedo and dive bombers. If you didn't know how to do that, you were pretty boned. If you knew how to do it, well, you best hope you're better at RTSs than the opposing carrier. Because, well, you need to win the air fight, which also means that you kind of need to be in a carrier that can win the air fight. Which was another issue with the old carriers that a lot of people seem to forget about, but it's mostly because the experienced carrier players were already upgraded. And that is how required the upgrades were for carriers. Yeah, I can make it along right here. That's what this part of the road's for, guys. Totally. But like, just using, say, even the tier 4s for as an example. The tier 4 aircraft carriers stock had tier 3 aircraft, and when upgraded had tier 5 aircraft. These aircraft had about the same stat difference as actually going from tier 3 to tier 5. Therein was the problem. Your stock aircraft carrier was leagues worse than that person's already upgraded aircraft carrier. Which honestly, way back in the day, caused a lot of frustrations with me because, at least when it came to Hosho, it was like 2 or 3 co-op battles and you would have your plane upgrades, or you could just free XP them. But not having those upgrades meant you were probably going to lose the air battle, and you'd see so many carriers without the plane upgrades, because they were brand new to carriers. They were brand new players. And then they would lose the air battle, and the battle was over. You'd lost. Because old carriers dealt that much damage and had that much control over the outcome of the battle. I mean, the same people that complain aircraft carriers are overpowered now, at least of the content creators, or former content creators, those are the same people who used to criticize people and mock them for, 1, going off on their own, and 2, for not always carrying defensive AA fire because you might encounter a carrier. Like, think about that for a minute. These are the people who say carriers are overpowered now. Yet, before, they were saying that you needed to give up your hydroacoustic search, your only countermeasure against destroyers, because you might encounter an aircraft carrier. Like, what? And, you know, oh, going off on your own is just stupid and you're asking to die. But now when people do it, its carriers are overpowered. Like, the amount of hypocrisy from these people is absurd. And like, it's... And you see it from players too, where like, oh, old CVs were so much more balanced and fair. It's like, no, they weren't. You just don't have any memories of them being overpowered, because you barely ever saw them outside of tiers 4, 5. Because the moment you reached tier 6, the only carriers you tended to see were tier 5s. Because the good carrier players were really good at making sure nobody played past tier 6. I literally was just inspected, guys. Screw off. Man, I'm starting to overheat. Love being sick. Like, I do apologize if I'm repeating any of my ranting points when it comes to the World of Warships carrier changes, but like... And they're still just proposed changes. These may all entirely change between now and February, which is when Wargaming says we're going to hear more about these changes, and that they're just still very much prototyping right now. Which, like, yeah, I can get that. That's fine. But to me, it sounds like they have a pretty solid idea of what they're doing. And unlike previous times that we've heard about potential changes to carriers, all the other times we've heard about it, it has been entirely within dev blogs. This was a news post, posted in-game. This is a much more likely to happen change than the previous dev blogs. The dev blogs were just that, developer blogs. Everything within them should be taken with a pinch of salt. Things posted to the actual news in-game? Yeah, that's almost certainly going to be actually implemented. The thing I'm hoping for is come February, when they do give us more information, they actually give us information. Because as it stands, we really do not have much information whatsoever as to actually what is being changed past the broad strokes. Like, we know carriers are going to be being given access to their secondaries. But what range are they going to have? Is the reload rates going to change? Is their ammo type going to change? Are they going to be swapped over to SAP? Because if all the guns were swapped over to SAP, that would be great. Like, they wouldn't even have to change the reloads if they did that. What about Saipan and Sanjiang? Are they going to be given secondaries in some fashion, even though that makes them ahistorical now? You know, things like that. Like, I'm sure they could find blueprints somewhere where there was plans to upgrade Saipan with the 76mm AA gun at the very least, which you could then maybe argue could be used as a secondary, firing semi-armor piercing. They could also just invent some blueprints where Saipan has 400mm guns slapped to it. Like, Wargaming really could do whatever they want. You know, they've made mention that they're going to be changing not only aircraft carriers, but ships when it comes to stats-wise around aircraft carriers. So, what does that mean for anti-aircraft? Because that would be what it would mean, in my mind, is that anti-aircraft is going to probably be made stronger. Or maybe weaker. By how much? Because that's going to heavily change how much, you know, this actually matters. I mean, if they do, like, a flat, let's say, 10% DPS increase across the board for every ship for their anti-aircraft, then ships like Wooster and Golden Lion are going to become absolute no-fly zones to everything except Franklin D. Roosevelt. If they reduce the HP of air squads by, let's say, 10 to 20%, well, now that's made Golden Lion and Wooster absolute no-fly zones to everything except Franklin D. Roosevelt. You see the problem I'm having? Like, we don't know enough, but what we can surmise isn't good. Like, it's not exactly encouraging to just be told, yeah, we're gonna make balance changes. But not be told in what way they're even thinking of making balance changes. I mean, I honestly am in the camp of the hallmark, at least at the moment, of players being just willfully ignorant of how aircraft carriers even work are people, and there's some CCs that are saying this, that seem to be under the impression that, say, a carrier spotting a destroyer was random. That the carrier didn't mean to do it, it just happened. And I'm sure sometimes, yeah, that does happen. I've had it happen playing asymmetrics, because I simply just don't care enough to track down the destroyer. But playing randoms as a semi-competent carrier player, I'm using when my planes are detected to triangulate where the destroyer is. And then I'm going for that location. A lot of the time, the destroyer leaves their AA on and makes it even easier for me. Like, but that's not a thing that a brand new player to carriers is likely to figure out that they can even do. They may not even completely put the two and two together, that detected is their squadron being detected. And like, it's just one of those things where, like, carriers have a lot of nuance to the skill that is required to play them. And contrary to what some of the biggest CCs and former CCs say, carriers are not as simple as just any idiot can play them and do well. They're not. If you honestly try to do that, you will fail so hard. And like, I remember pointing this out to a fair few people back when the carrier rework first happened. That seeing videos of, like, Flamu or Flambass doing extremely well in the reworked carriers was not evidence of the reworked carriers being powerful. It's evidence that they're good players. That's all that's evidence of. Like, case in point, like, either one of them could probably have an amazing game playing the Tier 2 Pan-Asian destroyer against random nublets being thrown into tier 10s. That doesn't make the tier 2 Pan-Asian destroyer overpowered. That makes them good at playing the game, and the people they're playing against not as good. By that same token, they generally have good games in literally every ship they play. Yet people go on anytime a new ship comes out and they play it as if their performance in it is going to be the average performance. I remember seeing that when Forrest Sherman was added. And everyone was going on and on about how amazing of a first game that I think it was Flambass had. Might have been Flamu. Their names are so similar. And turns out, they're just good at playing destroyers and got lucky. Both things happened. It's not to say Forrest Sherman is not a powerful ship, but it's nowhere near, 150k average damage. Not even within the top 5%. It's, in fact, pretty on par with every other Tier 10 destroyer. Imagine that one. But because they're good players and they perform well, that makes everyone go, well, everyone should perform well in this. It's like, no, that's not how it works. Being good at the game would give you an advantage when playing aircraft carriers. Because quite simply, aircraft carriers combine being able to aim everything. If you can't aim torpedoes, you're never going to land a hit with carrier-launched torpedoes. And I've had to give a lot of people advice on how to aim carrier-dropped torpedoes. Because they're not even, like, a lot of these people aren't used to even trying to aim torpedoes without an assistant reticule to help them out. Which leads to them never landing a torpedo hit. If you can't aim cruiser shells over a long distance, you'll probably not be able to aim rockets. Because you have to aim rockets from close range like you would cruiser shells at long range. You can't deal with battleship dispersion. You're gonna get frustrated with bombs very quickly. You know, it's just one of those things of... like... a good player is going to play good. I'll never understand why people don't seem to understand that one. Like, I'm not even a great player. Like, I'm not bad. I am above average. I'm not gonna say I'm, on the level of Flamu, Flambass, the really good players. But I'm more than better than most of the average people that play World of Warships. You can put me into basically any new ship, and I'm going to perform decently well in it. It might take me a match or two. I might not get it the absolute first match, but I'm still gonna manage it. And that's a lot of traffic over there. Just gonna pull it behind this truck. Don't care what else is coming. I'm going. I'm gonna be slow as balls going up this because they made me slow down right there. This is one of the moments where having manual control of my gears would actually probably be better, because I could just hold it in a low gear to get the most out of my torque. Like, it honestly gets kind of tiring dealing with the World of Warships community at times. Because, like... And I know it's not the entirety of the community, so that's kind of unfair. But, like, a lot of the big CCs that you end up finding, like the Mighty Jingles, Potato Quality, Flamu, Flambass, they're all very anti-carrier. And, you know, fun thing about that is you tend to cultivate the community that you would support. So the fact that they're very anti-carrier means that their communities are very anti-carrier. So, like, I actually left a comment on Potato Quality's video going over the changes, because I do like his content. I disagree with him on a lot of things, but I still like his content. And the comments are just full of people going, finally, it's about time carriers got nerfed. You know, there's a few people with the argument of these nerfs aren't going far enough. Even though we don't even fully know what the nerfs are all gonna be yet. Like, even Potato himself is very in favor of them. Which I'm honestly just waiting for the changes to go through, and then destroyers to become a lot more powerful, and then everyone to start complaining about destroyers again. Because once that happens, I'm going to start pointing out to people that they had an answer to destroyers. It was called carriers, but they complained too much, and now they don't have it anymore. Because, like, we don't have that many good, substantial answers to destroyers. There are... Let me see if I can think of all of them. I think there's 4 lines of cruisers that have radars. Wait, no. Yes. Worcester, Des Moines, Minotaur, Nevsky, Petro. That's 5. 6. Okay, there's 6 lines. The British light cruisers, you're rarely ever going to see them using radar. If they do use it, it is a substantial range. It's 10 kilometers. But you're rarely ever going to see them using their radar because they're so frail they need their smoke screens. The new Pan American cruisers have 9-kilometer radars. They're ignorable. They are fully ignorable. They're detected outside of their radar range, and their radar is only 9 kilometers. It is mostly worthless. The American light cruisers have a 9-kilometer radar. That is basically ignorable. I could use some fuel. Wait, no, I can't get fuel here. There is no way. There is no conceivable way I could get fuel here. I am way too long. The American heavies have a nice 10-kilometer radar. It's pretty substantial. It works. It's nice. And then you get the Russian cruisers with their 12s. The most recent addition being the Pan American cruisers, with a radar that, as mentioned, is basically worthless. That's not to say a 9-kilometer radar can't be useful, but it's definitely not substantial. It's not going to be the thing that turns the tide of the battle. Meanwhile, some of the oldest lines in the game, of the Russian cruisers and the American cruisers, the American heavies, with their 10 and 12-kilometer radars respectively, are substantial, but there are so many other cruiser lines that it's highly unlikely that you're ever actually going to see them on the enemy team consistently. Or even if you do see one there, it's highly unlikely that it'll be on the flank that you're on in your destroyer, leaving the only thing to counter destroyers as other destroyers. But there's a problem with that mindset too. And that can be exemplified by looking at Shimakaze and Kavarask. Two extremes, to be sure, but two relevant extremes. Kavarask has a detection radius of 9.7 kilometers. Shima, I don't know its exact detection, but it's around 6. You try to track down a Shima in a Kavarask without dying to the Shima's team. All destroyers are not equal. There's even a couple kilometer difference between Harugumo and Shimakaze, because they're not meant to fill the same role. Harugumo is a gunboat, Shimakaze is a torpedo boat. Torpedo boats are stealthy, gunboats aren't. Like, you can't rely on your team's destroyer being able to counter the opposing team's destroyer because of how the game was designed. And the matchmaker not taking into account the type of ship within the type of ship. You know, a good example with all of these new cruisers being added, new cruiser lines that don't have radars. Well, the opposing team could have 3 Petropavlovsks, Russian heavy cruiser, 12-kilometer radar on each of them. Your team could have 3 Venetsias. Those ships don't even fill the same role. Venezia is a long-range sniper. Or to make it even more of an extreme example, your team could have 3 Marseille, French super heavy cruisers that are basically battleships with very little utility at all, while the opposing team has 3 Petros. Because the game doesn't take into account that, hey, those cruisers are basically battleships, and those cruisers are utility radar ships. It just goes, this cruiser and this cruiser. We put cruiser on opposed team. That's about it. That is literally as far as it goes. And the same thing happens with destroyers. The game doesn't look at the destroyers on that are in the queue and go, okay, well that's 2 Shimas, so we should put 1 Shima on one team, 1 Shima on the other, and have them both on the same flank when they spawn. No, it doesn't do that. It just grabs 4 destroyers in total, and that might end up being both Shimas on the same team fighting a Kleber and a Kavarovsk. The Kleber and Kavarovsk are basically screwed, because neither one is going to have a smoke screen, and those Shimas outspot them anyway. Which also goes to continue as to why the warship's meta has shifted to be such long range. Is the matchmaker really does not take enough things into account, and never will. The only way the matchmaker is going to start taking more things into account is if Wargaming gives in and makes new types of vehicle, and then applies these new types to existing ships. Like, there really should be a classification for light and heavy destroyer. Light destroyers being the smokescreen, well, not even smokescreen, just the small detection radius torpedo-focused destroyers. The heavy destroyers being the large gun-focused destroyers. A good example there being Kleber. Kleber is a heavy destroyer. It has 139mm guns. Those are almost cruiser guns. That's how the French designed their destroyers, was to basically be small cruisers. Meanwhile, Shimakaze was a very light destroyer, made to go fast, be small, and unleash a wave of hell. And then retreat. When it comes to cruisers, they really should at the very least be classified in cruiser and battle cruiser categories, so that lights and heavies can still be in the same grouping, but the cruisers armed with battleship guns should really have their own classification. Battleships should also have that same distinction. Because, well, just using as a ship I mentioned earlier as an example of Bungo. Bungo does not fill the same role as even Yamato does. Bungo is a battle cruiser. It has no armor. It goes fast and has no armor. The whole point of a battle cruiser is to basically be fast enough to outrun the things that it can't fight, but have guns big enough to absolutely decimate everything else. It's like using the Americans' Alaska as an example. It was armed, it was a fast cruiser, faster than battleships at least. Faster than some other cruisers too. Armed with 305mm guns. Its guns were big enough to basically win any engagement against another cruiser. And it was fast enough to run away from battleships, because it would have never been able to fight a battleship. It would have lost that fight. I have rambled more than long enough. This stream's actually conveniently gone literally 2 hours. I think I'm going to end it here because... Wow, I didn't even get to pick. It just took me right into this. Okay. Good enough. I don't care. Achievement, I thought this should be heavy. Yeah. And then level up. Yep, there we go. I'm now out of skill points to spend ever. Because there's no more skills. But yeah, I do think I'm going to end things off here. I very much apologize, gaming with Nico. I am feeling under the weather, as the title implies, and this stream has been going for about 2 hours. I am getting very lightheaded, and I'm kind of starting to lose my voice, so... Though do check back tomorrow, I will probably be streaming again tomorrow. Though probably not this. It'll probably be World of Warships if you have any interest in that game. So I thank everyone who did come out and watch for coming out and watching. And I will be back streaming again tomorrow. I am doing my best to nuke this cold, flu, whatever it is out of my system. Good old Canadian Buckley's is pretty good for that. But, yeah. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll see y'all back here tomorrow for another stream.